Ladies and gentlemen, the long wait is over. Liberty Watchdog Network is finally here in celebration of the actual day of the signing of the Declaration of Independence on August 2nd, 1776. We thought it would be fitting to unveil the relaunch of our highly enlightening show that discusses America's founding principles and how they still apply today. Learn what our government was intended to be, how it has gotten out of control, and what you can do about it. If you are a concerned American about the direction of this country, then you are not alone and must tune in weekly every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can't defend what you don't know. Either we learn it or lose it. This show is based on over 40 years of research and over 15,000 hours of study on unconstitutional legislation. Please be sober-minded that what we are about to share will be shocking to you. For the further a society drifts from the truth, the more it will hate those that speak it. I am your son of the American Revolution host and LibertyWatchdog.com founder, Nate Green. So let's explore our nation's principles of liberty. I would like to share more with you about who I am by introducing you to some of my dear patriot relatives that inspired my family to educate our fellow citizens on the principles of liberty. Have you ever heard of Major General Nathaniel Greene or Colonel Timothy Matlack? Sadly, history tends to ignore these two gentlemen and overlook the important role they played for allowing me to be speaking to you today. General Greene was not a military-trained officer, though he would become Washington's most trusted friend and second in command of the Continental Army. Because Nathaniel Greene witnessed his family's shipping business being confiscated by the Crown, he was the first patriot to call for and coin the phrase that we needed a Declaration of Independence. Such tyranny inspired him to become self-educated to the art of war. In fact, he fought in many of the largest revolutionary battles, and his top aide was none other than the author of Washington's favorite pamphlet, Common Sense, written by Thomas Paine. Sadly, by the end of the war, he literally sacrificed his fortunes to pay his own troops with his own money. In fact, if it were not for Nathaniel, the southern states would never have been freed from British tyranny, and to show their gratitude, the state of Georgia honored him with a tract of land known as Mulberry Grove Plantation, which was a rice plantation. Sadly, he died in 1787 at the age of 44 of heat stroke. Another interesting part of forgotten history is an idea his wife Catherine Greene had that was developed and engineered by the family tutor Eli Whitney, creating the cotton gin, which would revolutionize agriculture in the South. This patent, however, could not be easily enforced, so this invention brought Catherine Greene and Whitney little financial reward. Now, what's sad is that my family and I were just recently in Savannah, and what we witnessed was appalling. We traveled to Mulberry Grove, and what we saw was just heartbreaking because there's an old plaque, and I'm sure people that live there don't even know it's there. They drive by it every day. But this tract of land that was once his plantation, where his house and his homestead existed, is being leveled. It's being converted into an industrial complex. And it's basically running over history. Sadly, in that home, that plantation house, isn't just where Nathaniel Greene lived and his wife, but it's also where Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin, and it's also where George Washington traveled a few times to check on his wife after Greene had passed away. So folks, I challenge you to reach out to your state governments, tell them that you care about American history and you want to preserve it for posterity. And I challenge you also to go check out Johnson Square and see where Nathaniel Greene is buried and the monument that's erected to him. And actually, he's also buried with his son. So, who is Colonel Timothy Matlack? If you ever saw the movie National Treasure, they mention him. He was the final penman of the Declaration of Independence on display in the National Archives. He was such an amazing scribe that in 1774 he was hired by Charles Thomson, Secretary of the First Continental Congress. Thomson also translated the first Bible in America from the Greek, known as the Thompson Bible. Colonel Timothy also penned Washington's commission papers, most of the redress of grievances of the Crown, including the grievances that the founders had against the blemish of slavery on this land. That's right, they were against slavery and appealed to the Crown to eradicate it from the colonies. He became clerk of the Second Continental Congress, and they elevated him to storekeeper of military surplus or supplies. He was elected colonel of the 5th Battalion under Washington. He later, with his friend Ben Franklin, helped forge the Pennsylvania State Constitution, and in 1780 he helped pass an act for the gradual abolition of slavery. That's right, folks, against slavery, the first law of its kind in the Western Hemisphere. And that's something you won't hear talked about or mentioned in school books today. So do you support and believe in the Constitution of the United States? Everyone I ask always says yes, but I need you to prove it to me by asking 4 basic questions. Where does liberty come from? How many delegated powers does Congress have? What about the Supreme Court? And what about the President? And if you're unable to answer these 4 basic questions, then sadly, we the people end up voting away our own liberties due to our own apathy. You know, many people say, well, I'm a conservative, and my question to them simply is, what are you trying to conserve? And they'll say, well, the Constitution, but if you don't know the Constitution, how can you conserve it? So today's topic of the day is, what is a source? What is the source of natural law? What is the source of the Declaration of Independence? What is the source of the Constitution? And most importantly, what is the source of liberty? Knowing the source is vital to understanding how something came into being. And it's also important to knowing how something can be repaired, or knowing where to get it repaired or fixed. So let me ask you, if you have a problem with your car, are you going to take it to a dentist? Well, why not? Or are you going to take it to a mechanic or someone that knows something about it? So when you go to the supermarket and you see chicken in a package, was it just born that way in the wrapper? Or did they come from somewhere? So today we're going to explore why it is important to know the source. So before we get into the topic of the day, our first segment, we're going to talk about some real news that you will not hear from what we call the Mongols of media. And if you didn't know, only 7 major corporations literally control everything that you see, be it on TV, hear from TV or radio, and touch via the newspaper. And please note that this may be old news, but it's new news to others. So first off, have you heard about policing for profit, the abuse of civil asset forfeiture? Under state and federal law, police departments can seize and keep property that is suspected of involvement in criminal activity. Unlike criminal asset forfeiture, however, the civil forfeiture, a property owner need not be found guilty of a crime or even charged to permanently lose their cash, their car, their home, or other property. And according to a new report published by the Institute for Justice called Policing for Profit, the Abuse of Civil Asset Forfeiture, most state laws are written in such a way as to encourage police agents to pursue profit instead of seeking the neutral administration of justice. The report grades each state and the federal government on its forfeiture laws and other measures of abuse. The results are absolutely appalling, folks. 6 states earned an F, and 29 states and the federal government received a grade of D. So, is this constitutional? Can government literally come into your home, your property, take it over without the due process of law? Well, let's go back in time. What did the British do to the colonists? One of the things they did, among others, was called quartering and confiscating property, just like they did for against Nathaniel Greene. So let's read the Fourth Amendment. It says, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be, here's the key word, violated. So what part of shall not be violated are people ignoring today? It goes on to say that, and no warrants shall be issued, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Wow. There's your answer, folks. So we need to hold their feet to the fire that this is completely illegal and it's unlawful, and just because they wear a badge does not mean they have the right to violate your constitutional liberty. So second up is a report that came from Reuters back in 2013. So some of you may know this, but if you don't, then just hear me out. That a Florida judge approves birth certificate listing of 3 parents. That's right. A Florida judge approved the adoption of a 22-month-old baby girl that will list 3 people as her parents on her birth certificate: a married lesbian couple and a gay man. So I ask you, how does this violate our laws? And most importantly, how does it violate God's natural law? So if you know God's natural law, then you can answer that question yourself. So back to the topic of the day. What is the source, and what is the source of natural law, and what is the source of liberty? And I have to tell you that those who are ignorant of the past are condemned to repeat it. I always tell my students that the one thing we share as a collective society is a short-term memory. So today we're going to learn about nuts and bolts and chains. What is the difference between a slave and an ignorant man? A slave feels the chains upon his neck. So I want you to picture in your mind that I'm holding a 5-inch bolt and a 1-inch nut, and I'm literally wearing a 3-foot, 1/2-inch anchor chain around my neck. You see, the problem we run into today is that our curriculum, our political system, is that everyone only looks to the nuts and bolts of the Constitution, not recognizing the most important thing. What is the source material to the Constitution, and what made up these nuts and bolts and the chain that I'm wearing? What is the source to this bolt, the nut, the chain? Why is it important? The answer is simple. It's very important. It's vital. For if you are an engineer or a designer, and if you don't use the proper hardened steel or the proper source material, then that bolt or chain will fail. So, ladies and gentlemen, the importance is not in having nuts and bolts or in the document we have today. The vital importance is understanding the source of that document, for without the source, the nuts and bolts become the cause for failure. So what causes such failure? I mean, nuts and bolts, what are they designed to do? They're designed to hold something together. But if they're not made of that proper material, they will fail. So would you trust a designer of a bridge if his work was not inspected? What about a dentist? Would you trust him if he never studied how to use the tools that he's going to put into your mouth? See, America, we the people are the inspectors of those whom we entrust with our design based on providential principles. But if we don't know providential principles and Constitution decision filtering, how can we discern anything or anyone? So in this republic, what is the source of our covenant or constitution and our liberty? Let me read from what inspired the founding fathers. 2 Corinthians 3:17. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Jefferson wrote in his notes in Virginia in 1782, can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are of the gift of God, that they are not to be violated, but with His wrath? John Adams wrote to Jefferson in 1813 that the general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the general principles of Christianity. I will avow that I then believed and now believe that those general principles of Christianity are as eternal and immutable as the existence and attributes of God. So if you can't read between the lines, let me spell it out for you folks. The source of liberty is God Himself, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And if we don't get back to His principles and His natural law, as Adam said to his cousin who happened to be a pastor at the time, we will only exchange tyrants and tyrannies. So what is the first thing you do to change the future? You revise or change the past. Have you ever researched the source materials for the books which you or your children read? Have you ever noticed that TV shows and so-called documentaries rarely ever supply their source material? There is a reason why they do not. Are you reading real history written by those whom lived it? Or are you reading someone's opinion of it, what is known as revisionism? For those who control the past, control the future. In closing today, I challenge you to become empowered by researching for yourself and learn the meaning of what a source is, including the source of our nation, by visiting LibertyWatchdog.com, and be sure to join our email list to take the next Constitutional Boot Camp. Remember, you can't defend what you don't know. Learn it or lose it. I'm Nate Green. See you next Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. May God bless you, and may God bless America.